Very interesting.
So we are on in 10 seconds. I'm going to close my mic.
Okay. Have fun.
Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at upenradio.com.
Hello, Rebel Hearts. Welcome, everyone. This is your host, Kristie Reeves. I'm excited you're joining us for another episode of Rebel Hearts with Kristie Reeves, and it's going to be an amazing conversation. We've been moving from a whole series of shows about veganism to addressing different spiritual topics because it's been a passion of mine for probably about 20 years, and I've been walking this path. So I'm excited about the different guests that have been coming onto the show, and I'm very excited about today's guest, which I'm going to introduce to you in one moment. But before I do Rebel Hearts, I just want to share something with you that I've been working on behind the scenes that a lot of you don't even know that I've been up to. And we've recently launched the Avatar Akashic Academy. That we're now bringing forth and sharing it with you. And over the past couple of years, I've been channeling something called star codes. And star codes are what I've been told from the channeling. Truth. Old energies that might have been dormant, but that is really, really needed as we're moving into this new golden age. That is really being. Energy healer, spiritual counselor, and channel for Vywamus and other ascended masters. On the soul level, he is known as, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, and partner Patricia Marston-Snow, a beautiful, amazing woman who's not going to be on today's show. He founded the Vywamus Foundation, one of Earth's foremost schools of advanced metaphysical studies with ongoing. Let me welcome Halsey Snow.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Halsey. Presence over here for having our conversation today, because I know she's a big part of the Vywamus Foundation and everything that you've been co-creating. I actually want to start where it all started with you. What was your inspiration, or how did you first connect to Vywamus?
Well,
Is that a big question at the very beginning?
Yeah. I was living in Boston, and I had been getting body work from a woman who was introducing me to massage and some energy healing and so on. And she handed me this flyer, said, "Here, you should go check out these people." And it was for a center in Portland, Maine. At the time, it was called the Center for New Age Studies, which is what my wife Pat, we weren't together at the time, was running. It was a metaphysical bookstore, and crystal shop, and she had a classroom there, and she was doing classes and channeling and so on. And I was still sort of, you could say, in the infancy around the whole channeling thing. And in the flyer, it said, you know, we're going to be hosting her teacher at the time, a woman named Janet McClure, who's passed on for. Well, eventually, yeah.
Eventually.
Did get to, you know, work with him, and really appreciated the work very much, because I worked with different channels at different periods of time, and they all are unique, and they all have valuable insights that you tend not to get on your own or just through a counseling focus.
Yeah.
And but with Vywamus, there's something about the way he works that's very direct. He doesn't like beat around the bush, but he also goes below the surface to show you exactly what is going on, that you're not really aware of what's going on. And so that I find is fairly unique.
Amazing. Amazing. And how was it in your first experience with him when you sat in that first initial channeling?
Well, you know, at the time, and still, I suppose you could say, I'm very kind of mentally oriented.
Okay.
And so I had my questions, and I was looking for information on this, that, and the other thing. And of course, he is giving me information about myself and about how I was actually, through my belief structure, creating the experiences that I wanted to have information about. And there's a part of me, you know, in the background that says, yeah, without really knowing, you know, the depth of what he was pointing out to me. And I would say a lot of his students have this experience where 5, 10, 15 years later, they come back and they say, I got to tell you, I had this amazing awareness, this insight, this realization. What he told me back at the very beginning, it finally hit me what he was talking about.
All these years later.
Yeah. And you think you know what you're hearing, but you can only hear what you're ready to hear.
Exactly. And I feel like, yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that, because I'm wondering the reason why we cannot receive at the moment we are being given that information is probably because of some kind of resistance or some kind of, you know, I don't really like to use the word blockages, but something we're not ready to look at the moment.
Let me frame that a little bit differently.
Yeah, please.
Because it goes right to the heart of the work that we do. Each person, what you have to work with is your perception. And your perception. And what most people don't realize, which is very fundamental to the work that we do, is we're all creating with a certain energy, you could call it, that we have used different words to describe. First word we started out using was the word denial. Now, everyone kind of knows what that is. I'm going to give you Vywamus's definition of denial. Okay,
please do that.
Pretending that something is different than it really is. Pretty simple.
Right? Yeah, perfect.
But yet we're doing that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then we moved away from that word recently, and we started to use more the word pretend, because that kind of, gives you more of a sense of how we're creating our experience every day with a lot of the energy of pretend. And when it comes to pretend, and this is what gives me a sort of an insight into what I studied and learned much earlier in my life, Eastern philosophy and Eastern religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, and a lot of them talk about living in illusion. You've probably heard of that too, Kristie. Anyone with any kind of metaphysical background has come across the concept that we live in illusion. But what does it mean? Because the world seems so real.
Yeah, it does.
And when you combine that with I'm the creator of my experience, and what I'm creating is primarily my perception of everything, and my perception is colored tremendously by my choice to focus a lot on this energy of denial/pretend, then I start to understand what it means that I'm living in illusion. In other words, everything in your experience is your creation, whether you can acknowledge that or not.
Yeah, I love that.
And everything in the world, in your field of perception, is your reflection.
Yeah.
Whether you can acknowledge that or not. And this is where we get into another key, you could say, analysis.
Yeah, I read about the stories.
The way that we frame sort of our experience in the mental realm is that primarily what most people are familiar with outside of, let's call it the meditative state, or outside of altered states of consciousness, our everyday waking consciousness is what we call your story. You're working with stories, okay? It's your thoughts. Pick any experience, it's a focus on what is not. Whatever you're in non-reception of, whatever you don't like, whatever you want to change, whatever you think is wrong, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and that's
where your focus on what is not.
And that's where we place our attention. So
you start to learn a different language.
Yeah.
I mean, it's English. You know, you can use any language that you speak that is spoken on the earth at this time. But the fact is, we start to evolve our understanding of ourselves and our experience. And as we do that, we evolve the language and the meanings that we put on words and how we use those words. You know, when I use the word denial, in classic psychological sense, that's bad.
Yeah.
You need to give it up and you need to get out of denial. But the fact is, there is no coming out of denial. When you see how widespread it really is in our experience, it's not wrong, it's not bad, it is what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you can start to acknowledge it for what it is and recognize you do have a choice about focusing your attention somewhere else, just like you were saying in your experience, that's the key.
Yeah, yeah. And I read on your website, you really look at what are the patterns of the conscious, subconscious mind. And would you explain to our audience why it is so important to look at the subconscious and what, you know, how powerful the subconscious mind actually is in creating our reality?
Okay. Well, what you're referring to as the subconscious, I would call the unconscious.
The unconscious, yeah.
Yeah. And in our unconscious are many things. I mean, our unconscious is vastly greater than our consciousness. And primarily what's in there that we are, you could say, dealing with on an everyday basis is what we call your programming.
Yeah.
And it literally is programming, just like on a computer. You don't see your computer's programming. You get to work with it through the apps, through the programs, through the different functions that your computer or your device, your phone provides for you. But behind all that is the programming that allows it to do what it does. And it doesn't allow it to do what's not in the programming.
I love that analogy. That's awesome.
Right? Because that's exactly what's going on an energetic level within each person's, what we call their psyche. Psyche is composed of conscious and unconscious, right? It's your programming, and your programming is pretty unconscious. Now, there are ways to make it conscious, and one of the ways, like I said, is through this story analysis. You start to look at what you say and what you think about something and how you feel about something, and you write it down, and you start to look at that as your story, and there are clues in there that you can use to discover your programming. And then how do you go about shifting your focus from the programming? Because when you think about most people and the routines that they like in their daily life, I mean, routine is something that more than anything else shows us, how much we are like a robotic being. And that is essentially what your programming makes you, is a robotic being, because you tend not to go outside the programming.
Yeah, and you don't pay attention to it. You just show up for it, but you don't consciously look at it. It's kind of like you don't think about breathing in, breathing out. You just automatically do it.
So one of the ways that we tend to describe programming is in the form of patterns, something we call patterns. And we actually have, this is something that's not completely unique, but it's fairly unique to our Patty's and my channels, is that we have a way of going into a person's, an individual or group subconscious, and sort of reading the pattern and being able to put it down.
A story that you can share with us, maybe a personal one, or maybe something you can share about someone else that showed what a difference a changing of a pattern can make for us, or just, give us an example.
Well, inadequate,
Mm-hmm.
victimized by this, situation where we're not really looking at it as a reflection. We're not really looking at it as my creation.
Mm-hmm.
You could say the victim perpetrator framework goes hand in hand with the denial that there is actually a me and a not me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I would say in that situation, we're looking at a pattern of expectation on self that, that one of the fundamental things I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to be a problem solver. And if I have this image of myself as a problem solver, then I have to maintain that image by solving problems. And so one of the first things I have to do is I have to keep pretending that problems are something real.
Yeah, interesting.
Did you ever hear that, only the games that we play of pretend and illusion that we like to pretend are not real. You see.
Where do these patterns come from?
Mm-hmm.
The patterns that you talk about.
Wow.
How do we create these patterns?
Okay. This is a story. I mean, Vywamus has given this story many times, but usually just his students. It kind of goes back to, where does the human being come from? And, if you are open to the idea that, human was not evolved, human was created to be human, then who's the creator there? So I'm going to cut to the chase here. Okay. Vywamus said, and this gets actually into a very interesting topic, Kristie. It gets into the earth itself.
Please
where the
share.
earth is from, where the earth is from, not from this source. And by source, I'm talking about this whole universe, the creator of this experience of self, which actually Vywamus says is bigger than this universe, but we're just going to use the word this source, okay?
Yeah.
Which, for the metaphysical community is equivalent to, we would say, this Godhead or this God, okay? The earth is from outside of this experience. Got pulled into this experience because of the programming that was being played with on the level of the sourceness that resulted in the, how can we say it? Well, you see it reflected on the earth very well. The diminution of the feminine essence.
Yeah.
Okay? The story that there's something wrong with the feminine is somehow less, the feminine is somehow lacking, when in fact it's the feminine essence which is behind all of creation. You get to see this played out in the cultures on the earth.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the earth came into this source because the earth is like a pure, pulsating feminine essence.
Yeah.
And when there's no feminine essence, there's a collapse of space. And what Vywamus has said is you don't want to experience that on any level. Okay. Collapse of space, the space-time continuum. Think black hole. Okay. Black holes come from collapse of the space-time continuum. So here's the earth, and the earth has this amazing feminine essence, which different cultures, different races of beings who are part of this source, want to experience, but how then can you get a hold of this energy, this very unique energy and essence, without actually touching it? And that, he said, was the purpose for the creation of the human race. And there were actually 26 different ET races who got together on this collaborative project to create a form, which is what we call the human being, that would allow them to energetically receive something from the earth that they desired to receive without actually having to touch the earth. This is pretty far out.
Love it.
Pretty far out stuff. Yeah. And that's what's going on the emotional level, much more so than the mental level. Now, here we are, we're what we call multidimensional beings, right? Yeah. And what are the multidimensional aspects of self that we are dealing with here? Well, there's the mental realm, the mind. There's the physical body, which is not the same as the mind. Right? The physical body is our anchoring point, our grounding point here on the earth.
Yeah.
Because the physical body is of the earth. And then there's the emotional body, what we call the emotional body, the emotional realm, the experience of self on an emotional level, which is an energetic realm unto itself, not the same as the mind, not the same as the physical body, but in the experience of the human, they all coexist together in the same space. And your consciousness is what makes this happen. Your consciousness in combination with the energy of the earth. And a third point that Vywamus has referred to as first he started out calling it a point of assumption, then he started calling it a point of fire.
Okay,
it's this. Your experience being here. And then, of course, everyone thinks, well, what about the spiritual aspect of self? Right? And what we would say is simply that what most people refer to when they talk about spiritual is they take all the other dimensional aspects of self that we don't really have an awareness of very often, or can't differentiate one from the other, and we lump them together and we call it spiritual.
Yeah.
Okay. So here you are, this multi-dimensional being.
Believing we're just human, just like I want to throw this in.
Yeah.
A lot of
Human, i.e. creators in training. Because one of the things that Vywamus has said has happened to the human race after it was created, that the progenitors, the ET partners, didn't expect, was something that came from the earth herself. Vywamus calls it a gift of spirit. That your soul is something that emerged from this multidimensional being that wasn't there before, that came from our being on the earth, our being created and living on the earth.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Amazing
for
story.
That.
I mean, I've given you the have the other side. Like we strive to be right by eliminating the wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's fine. We do that all the time. But, what's the experience? Why is it that in the experience of meditation, I continue? Well, what's happened is in our perception, we've created what we call an artificial image, the image of self. And this has been written about by many authors, many writers, psychiatrists, psychologists, some call it the imago. It's it's the self-image. Let's use that term, okay? Yeah. Self-image. And we all believe, A, I didn't create that. B, it's me. And, it's who I am.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't see it as an artificial creation. I don't see it as this covering over who I really am. I'm pretending it's really me. In psychology, they call it the personality.
Yeah, it's the identification with the story.
Exactly. Your self-image is completely a creation of stories. And, we defend them.
Yeah.
Because we believe it's who we are. And this is a lot of the work that we do with, Vywamus students is bringing up your story, acknowledging it's a story, finding out, do you want to change that story? Does it bring you happiness? Is it something that you'd like to change? How about if we go beyond the story? Are you willing to discover who you are beyond all your stories of yourself? And, that's something that's a real challenge to the psyche and particularly to the mind.
Yeah.
Because we start to become aware that the way humanity is using the mind dimension of self at this point in time is unfortunately extremely limiting and very, it takes you way off track. If you think about being on a path of self-discovery or self-awareness or self-enlightenment, however you want to call it, expansion of consciousness, whatever you want to call it, eventually that path is going to bring you the awareness that you have to evolve your mind. And evolving your mind today means letting go of your stories.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting that we see so much Alzheimer's, dementia, things that are considered to be diseases in older people, and they're showing up even in younger people today, where there is what we would call space in the mind where you don't want space to be, where there should be something there. There should be a memory there. There should be, I know how to do that there. There should be,
story.
And there's space there. And that is seen to be a problem. I'm losing my mind. Good for you.
Finally.
Now we'll get to see something more of who you really are.
Yeah.
And when you think about consciousness, your consciousness is creating all of this. You're creating the play.
Yeah.
And humanity itself is at a point of taking a step forward beyond the game of pretend.
Yeah.
Whether you are willing to acknowledge that or not, it's happening. And this is why I would say there's so much stress in the world today, why there's so much strife, why there's so much, confusion and chaos.
Yeah.
Why there appears to be so many, time-honored traditions and structures that are breaking down, and why there's so many people who just seem out of nowhere to be losing it.
Yeah.
It's because the structures that we're used to are all based on different forms of denial, different forms of pretend, and the energy of pretend is dissolving.
I love it. Yeah.
Because self is asking self to move beyond the stories and the pretend, and to focus more on what is
Mm-hmm.
about self.
I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Halsey, I'm looking at the time and we have 5 more minutes before we have to wrap up. It feels like this could be like a 3-hour conversation.
It's a lifetime.
It's a lifetime. And even
It's been my lifetime, I can tell you that. It's been my lifetime, yeah.
And is there a final message or a final inspiration you have for our Rebel Hearts audience before we finish up for today?
Well, this might sound a little, I don't know what the word is. Literally, there's nothing wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
You're fine the way you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're the creator of your experience. Yes, you're focusing on pretend. Yes, you're pretending you're not pretending, and you're becoming aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever your chosen path is, whatever you're choosing to do in the moment is just fine.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not the victim that you're pretending to be. And if you could maybe remember that and remind yourself of that in the morning when you wake up, like, Halsey, just remember today, you're not the victim that you like to pretend you are.
Mm-hmm.
And remind yourself about that through the day. That could make a big difference because it opens up space for something new to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And when you seek and you ask yourself to bring yourself any experience, you always do. Whether you can acknowledge you're the creator of it or not, you always do. Self always responds to self, even when you pretend you're not. That's what I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. How can our audience get in touch with you? How can they work with you, find out more about you? Share that information with us, please. What do you offer? Do you have anything special coming up?
Well, if anyone's listening in Europe, we work twice a year in Berlin, Germany, Stockholm, Sweden, and Oslo, Norway. We have ongoing groups and public programs in each of those cities. We'll be there through the month of October.
I mean, nice.
And we're doing more. We're gonna start to do more. What UBN's been doing for quite some time, get an online presence going. You can check in with our website, vywamusfoundation.com. Vywamus, and it means we live.
Amazing.
We live.
I love
and we do live.
We do live. And you and Patricia also offer one-on-one sessions with clients. You work over the phone. If people are in a different part of the country, or if they live in Maine, they come and see you in person.
Yep. We do distance sessions all the time. We work with people in New Zealand. Whether it's Skype or Zoom or whatever, or on the phone, doesn't matter. And healing as well, distance healing as well. We offer healing as well as energetic work and channeling.
Awesome. There's something else that Halsey and Patty are doing. And we actually did an interview about their other work last year. They have a company called Golden Ratio Products. And that's how actually Halsey and I met many, many years ago.
Yeah.
And it's the most beautiful, incredible looking glassware. But Halsey, in a sentence or two, share with us. Can you share with us within one sentence? And audience members, Rebel Hearts, if you want to find out more about it, go into the archives, listen to the interview Halsey and I did last summer, because it teaches you the whole concept about it. But Halsey, share with us in 1 or 2 sentences what Golden Ratio Products are.
It's glassware that restructures water. And you are a water being. You are 99% water. Your consciousness, your entire life is based on your water. And your water needs to be structured. And all the water that you're drinking is not structured because of the way it's been processed. It's been denatured, you could say. You need to get your water back into a natural state. Even if it says natural spring water on the bottle, it's been processed, so it's actually unstructured. And no one else will really tell you about it, because what water company wants you to know that the water you're drinking, isn't really being able to recognize, your body doesn't recognize it as water because it's unstructured.
Yeah. Awesome. And I have my to-go cup over here the water came right from the Aladdin carafe. at my home right before I did the show.
Good for you. Thank you so much.
I just want to say thank you so much for being on today's show. What a gift. Thank you for sharing all this incredible information, knowledge. Rebel Hearts, I hope you are so inspired and you're going to now pay attention to your stories, uncover those patterns, and move forward. Enjoy happiness and love. Rebel Hearts is all about inspiring you to become the change that you want to be in the world. So go out and become the change that you want to see. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks for our next show. And in the meantime, remember to rebel on.
Thanks, Kristie.